Big organizations. Yeah, you know exactly who you are if you're tapping into this, right? And we look at this across all kinds of different industries and types of organizations. It doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit, an NGO, a government, a corporation, whether it be a Fortune 500 or a mid-sized company growing. We're talking about just big organizations. Just as a reminder, we use the same format, which is someone who's just started out, and that's where you are, but you're not getting growth. You started, but you're not getting. So just started just from zeros, just starting out and not getting growth, and then getting growth, but not enough growth. So it's the same format as before. We'll go through one by one. So first thing is like we've got our big organization here, and the first thing we need to do is educate, get others on the same page by empowering them with the knowledge. So in the growth thinking process is getting them on this training course. That's one of the starting ways of doing it. Getting them the book, explaining to them how it works, sending them to the website, getting people educated about what it is and how it works and what the benefits behind it are, right? And that's super, super, super important to getting people together and aligned. And the first thing you got to do is educate them, handholding, okay? So working with others to ensure that their success is also satisfied. So this might mean you may have like a cross-functional team. You have different people across different functions in your organization, and you may need to handhold different people because ultimately you're looking for a big win, and that big win should have multiple people involved, so everybody has a capital W together, right? This is not an individual thing. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to handhold people through this process. It's a very simple process, very straightforward, but you need to handhold them through it. And that may require some onboarding, some nurturing that allows people to really think very carefully and get them on board. Next is experiments. So you need to build a culture of low risk, high culture, and very fun approaches to learning. So this is super, super important. Like you wouldn't believe how many organizations I've been consulting for and building organizations for 25 years. You wouldn't believe how many organizations just don't like to experiment, even if they have an R&D department and R&D seems to be very core to their business. You'd be surprised because experimentation is seen as one of these things where it has like the most direct relationship to failure, and guess what, that is true, but how you look at it is the difference. And so you need to be building a culture around the idea that experimentation is super important, because if we don't test things out, we just don't know what the results are. One of the mindset change techniques that I use in growth thinking, in growth hacking in general, I call this the boardroom ego. Boardroom ego is we walk in and everybody seems to know everything, and it's a matter of whose opinion is stronger would lead the way. Super dangerous. It doesn't work out very well. What it comes down to is starting with a statement that I usually train people on. And the statement is saying, I don't know. The benefit of starting with a statement that says, I don't know, means we start from together at a blank paper. And the only way to get past that blank paper is to experiment, because the reality is that we don't know what's going to work. I may have an assumption, which is okay. It's an okay way to start. We may have 10 guys with 10 different assumptions, but the point is that we got to start experimenting to really, really understand what is actually working. And that starts with the statement, like I told you, I don't know, and working your way forward with that. Next is you've started, you've done some things are moving along, but you're just not getting any growth. So the first thing we need to look at is insights. Okay, so don't have answers, get them, even if they are not perfect. Be insightful with your decisions. So the reality is, when you're working in a big organization, having the right data and the right information is super crucial to you making a super correct decision. The reality is that you're working with highly inefficient information. You're working with information that is fragmented. You're working with information that's misleading. You're working with information that is highly misrepresentative. And that's super real. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. And so you need to become insightful, right? You need to think insights. Okay, how do I work best with what I have? How do I use what I have to get a better decision? Because the information you're going to have is never perfect. Even if it looks stellar, looks absolutely perfect, it never is. That's just how it is. Leadership. Okay. Ensure everything from top down is aligned on how to grow. Okay. So the key word here is how to grow, right? It's really important to get your leadership on board if they're not sponsoring this, to get them on board to sponsor this, because growth comes from the top of the organization, not from the bottom. And I've talked about this in some of my other training about organizational structures, and how organizational structures play a fundamental role in how an organization actually grows. And the number one learning lesson for us has been unicorns, right? What unicorns have done is they put growth hacking at the top of the hierarchy. Anything that does not lead to growth is absolutely killed. They just remove it, right? And so they create this superstructure where growth is at the center of everything, and if nothing leads to growth, it's gone immediately. And the complete opposite, if it leads to growth, they continue to nurture the hell out of it to keep it growing. So, not all organizations work and think like that, but it's important that the leadership and the kind of top-down structure understand this very well. And that leads us to the next point, which is structure, right? Ensuring the structure enables your growth. If not, fix them. If not, start a new unit. So you need to find a way to fix it. Every organization's got its politics. It requires some diplomacy and different ways of getting things done. Sometimes, and not sometimes, but in many cases, what I've seen is starting a complete new project or unit is usually one of the best ways to make this happen. If you look at disruptive innovation, some of the models that have been used behind that, usually what these large organizations will do, and they've been taught to do this by some very smart strategists, is don't integrate it into your organization. Don't let it take on all the things that have held you back, but rather build a whole new unit that develops that innovation. And so if you look at Google, that became Alphabet, and that's exactly what Alphabet does. Alphabet has taken all these units and broken them down in ways that they're most efficient and effective, so they grow, right? There's a lot to be learned in that, and unicorns, again, are an excellent example. For those who don't know what a unicorn is a startup company worth $1 billion or more. There's about 500 of them globally. Half of them are in the United States, and about 25% of them are worth over $10 billion, believe it or not. Anyways, moving on. So getting growth, but not getting enough. So the first thing is leverage, right? So it's using your resources wisely. Explore more of what you have that isn't being used wisely. This is super important. You've got all these things that are sitting there, but they're not being used very well. Sometimes connecting the dots in an effective way is all that is needed to create a solution. And using the growth thinking process to do that, to create growth and find a growth hack that combines things that haven't been used well or well enough is huge. You'd be surprised. Blind spots. Okay. So you're missing something. Find it quick, leverage it now. So if it's not there and not being used well, but let's say that something's just missing altogether, it's a really small part of the equation is missing, find it, create it, build it, leverage it. That's what you need to do. Consistency, okay? So more effort is needed, so do not stop now. Keep going, but keep learning quickly. Okay? So this is super important. If you recall in the previous one, we talked about timing, when to quit. Sometimes the level of consistency isn't enough to get the results, and so you need to become a little bit more consistent. You need to have a little bit more drive, more motivation, more inspiration, and just keep learning, because the learning process ensures that consistency is getting utility. And so that's like a super important part when you're looking at a bigger organization. Consistency sometimes can be a barrier as well. And that's when processes are overcomplicated, right? What we don't want is overcomplicating things. We want things to be super simple. We want things to be super fast, and we want things to be super low cost, but we need them to be consistent. There's a story I'm going to share with you quickly. I build several kind of high growth teams, and this happens all the time. We have a massive success. Someone comes in and we see this spike in the graph, and they see me. I'm not so happy, although everybody's celebrating that we got this massive spike of growth. And I tell them, we see the problem with the spike is that you're consistently chasing the first experience like you had the first experience, and so you're going to get exhausted. It's just a matter of time. What we're looking for is a rising horizon. Okay, so we're not looking for a spike. We're looking for a rising horizon, and the only way to do that is consistency.